everyone. This is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Like I said, I don't typically do shows on Sundays, but I have a few shows that I want to get through that I didn't have the opportunity to get through over the weekend or over the week. This one in particular, one of my subscribers asked me about this, Glenn Greenwald having an interview with Tulsi Gabbard. Now, interestingly enough, you can call it an interview with Tulsi Gabbard, but you can also call it Glenn Greenwald making an argument using Tulsi Gabbard as the prop to make that argument. The first time I watched this interview, this was several days ago, I didn't see it. And the second time I watched it, today, as I was going up to the point of the part that I wanted to talk about, the Russiagate stuff, that Tulsi Gabbard gets to have a chance to talk directly to. Glenn Greenwald is just making an argument. Glenn Greenwald used to be a lawyer. And this notion of you never ask a question that you don't know the answer to, you don't want to get surprised. But going with that knowledge that he's asking her questions that he potentially already knows the answer to, he's leading her through a question set. And the question set follows a very logical process. It's like, what do you think was causing the issues of chaos around the world, this kind of populist revolt in the various countries? She let her make her case. Can you see a correlation between the difficulties that people were having in the community itself, particularly in the areas where Democrats needed to win the election? And he would let her answer. He already knows the answer to that question. And he proceeds on. And by the time you get to this subject of Russiagate, you have a perspective that immediately comes across as the Democrats are screaming Russia in order to cover for the fact that they failed. And they are retreating into a conspiracy theory and this level of cynical politics, as opposed to dealing with the reasons why they lost to reality shows. And to this degree, why if the election was held today, Clinton would still lose to that reality show host who has been president for the last several years. So let's listen to it. This is the question that Glenn is getting to regarding Russiagate, her perspective of Russiagate. And it's something very specific that Tulsi Gabbard nails that I think is more important probably than anything else. I mean, Russiagate takes all the air out of the room. This notion of talking about jobs, income inequality. Bernie Sanders has to, barely be able to break through to get across something about healthcare or Social Security expansion. Medicare for All has taken a certain tone, but the Medicare for All had gathered a certain resonance in general, and often you have the Democratic Party trying to find ways to even subvert that. They were at apparently a retreat, coconuts, spas, I like spas myself, massages, and lobbyists telling them why they need to find ways to stop Medicare for All. But in this case, let's listen to Tulsi Gabbard have this conversation about Russiagate, the problems associated with going on a political path, essentially down that path. And it's not just Tulsi, by the way. What's her name? Oh, God, Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi comes out at some point and says she thinks that the Republicans are trying to goad them into impeaching Donald Trump. Now, whether that's true or not, I suspect what Nancy Pelosi knows is that she doesn't have it. You can't use a conspiracy theory to try to impeach the president of the United States. You could, but that looks so bad. And the public that believes at this point, at least one half, that this is a witch hunt, is not going to buy it. It's going to look extraordinarily political. Now, Nancy Pelosi, whether she believes that the Republicans are trying to goad them on or not, what she does know is she needs to stop this group of, let's say the far left. I can't say any bad names about them because I'm going to want to use those people later on. But the fringe left, the loony left in this regard, that want to impeach the president of the United States because that's leaking into our current political affairs regarding the presidency, the Democratic primaries. That's going to be used as a political touchstone of trying to attack Donald Trump using another mechanism. Meaning, if a Democrat is running for office and the president of the United States is being impeached while that Democrat is running for office, that's just another angle of attack that the Democratic Party is going to use. The House of Representatives is going to be used as an attack point to hit Donald Trump. Mark my words, I'm telling you it's true. Nancy Pelosi, who's head of that House, doesn't seem to want that to take place. And whether or not she believes they're trying to goad them into it, or whether she's saying that Republicans are trying to goad them into it in order to stop Democrats from pushing this angle, who knows? It doesn't seem like she wants to do it. But let's hear Glenn Greenwald and Tulsi Gabbard.
Now, let me ask you about something I wish we could avoid, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about, which is what the Democrats have largely spent their energies on messaging-wise and politically over the last 3 years, which is what we'll call Russiagate for shorthand. The original conspiracy theory was that Donald Trump conspired with the Russians to meddle in the 2016 election, and himself was either a Russian agent or at least a Russian asset of Vladimir Putin and Moscow.
By the way, that's Cenk Uygur's perspective, that Donald Trump is being given instructions by Vladimir Putin. I swear to God, I'm not lying. He's saying this literally. You can look at his interviews where he's had debates between him and Aaron Matei. Aaron Matei even giggles after Cenk Uygur says it. Go look at his I Told You So video. Let's keep.
Moscow. There's been a 22-month investigation that culminated in the Mueller report that said that it could not find evidence to establish this conspiracy theory. A colleague of yours in the House, Adam Schiff, has taken the lead in assuring Americans for almost 3 years that he's seen direct evidence of this conspiracy that Mueller, with all the subpoena power in the world, couldn't find. And even with the Mueller report now issued, it seems that it's still ongoing with all kinds of ancillary controversies. What is your view? I mean, obviously, everybody agrees we should fortify our election system from interference, that we should have paper ballot backups and things of that. So put that to the side because it's not really in controversy. But in terms of what the Democrats did in backing behind this conspiracy theory that in some sense was at least debunked by the Mueller report and don't really seem like they're ready to move on, what is your view on all that?
Well, two things. First of all, I don't think we should sweep aside the necessity to protect our elections infrastructure so quickly, because the fact is, how many years have gone by since 2016 or 3 years later, and still there's been no legislation passed or action taken by Congress or the administration to harden our elections infrastructure.
Because neither don't really care. I'm just saying, neither don't really care. If it was a tax cut, they would have jumped on it. This is kind of the argument, God, this sounds so weird, that I used to use dealing in my own thoughts about my dad. I know that sounds a weird side, but it's true. It's like, if I had $1,000, would he come to the house to get the $1,000? The answer is probably yes. So is my value less than $1,000? Well, yeah, apparently, yes. Now, that's not necessarily entirely fair. That $1,000 may be somewhat of a fleeting thing, whereas the assumption is that the kid is always going to be there. But you get my point. Let's let Tulsi finish. But my point is, they don't care. I don't think they care. The United States, using foreign policy, one of the things, particularly in the Tillerson memo, was that allies, friends, regardless of how atrocious they are, need to be treated better than people who you don't particularly like. And for people you don't like, you use human rights as a club to hit those countries with. It's just what they say. It's not necessarily the reality of things. The Democratic Party will scream about the elections, yes. What Tulsi Gabbard is saying is, hey, if you really believe that something is going on with our elections, let's fortify elections. You have no idea how much I agree with her on this. I don't think they should sweep that under the rug, but that's not what Glenn Greenwald is talking about. Glenn Greenwald even expressly said, yes, this is what we should do, but Tulsi has a bill, however, that she's been put forth to try to strengthen elections, going to paper ballots. I agree with her on it. Our elections do need to be strengthened. How do you know that the person you elected is a person that you elected? Meaning, how do you know that the guy who takes the office was the actual person based on the vote tally? How do you know? What do you have that you can go back and you can look at and say, this is the person who I voted for, and I know that this vote was registered in the way that I gave that vote? And if you don't have that, how do you have secure elections? Like, there's been so much talk about people saying our elections are dicey, these machines are hackable, etc., etc. Fine. Let's do something about the elections. Let's all, at the very least, agree that our elections need to be stable. This is one of the most important edifices that we have, this kind of conceptual edifice, this thing of our elections. That's not the thing that we want in question. It's not the thing we want in question. Let's keep going.
remain extremely vulnerable to either a foreign country or a bad actor or whoever coming in and actually hacking into our systems and changing the votes that we cast. This is the biggest threat to our 2020 elections and to our democracy.
So do you favor paper
I've
ballot
introduced
backups?
Yes, I've introduced legislation, the Securing America's Elections Act. It is a very simple, very direct bill that would simply say, hey, you need to either use paper ballots or have a voter verified paper backup so that we can audit the votes that are cast in case there is some kind of interference or manipulation of our votes. So I want to make sure that that's important because Congress refuses to take action, which begs the question, are they more interested in just talk or actually solving the problem? And it is the former, given the fact that this bill or any other bill like it has not been brought forward.
And then what do you see as the political but also the international repercussions of this? You mentioned earlier this Cold War between the U.S. and nuclear powers, but also in terms of democratic messaging. How do you view the last 3 years in terms of the Democrats' bet on this conspiracy theory?
We can't understate the dangerous repercussions of this new Cold War that we find ourselves in, with ever increasing tensions between the United States and Russia. You know, people forget, unfortunately, that we still have nuclear armed missiles pointed at each other, still on hair trigger alert. So the fact that we are in this place now where we're at a greater risk of nuclear catastrophe than ever before in history is a direct consequence of the fact that our leaders have failed us.
Just also, so we're very clear, any conflict with Russia is a conflict with China. And we have no idea how something like that breaks, meaning how the world breaks into two in this way. Look at the trade deals that these guys have been signing. I don't think I have the one up. Look at the Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, you have, I think it's like 62% of the country, of the world, the ones that haven't signed up, the Western nations, Japan, the United States, essentially lapdog nations of the United States, with the other nations going on with China. This is, she's right. And we've been demonizing both. One pursuant to a trade deal and the other one for political expedience. Let's keep going.
And in light of the Mueller report, which I assume you've read at least part of, if not all of, do you believe that Donald Trump and his close circle did in fact conspire with the Russian government to meddle in the 2016 election?
The Mueller report made clear that there was no evidence of collusion. And I think that for those of us who supported this investigation, because for any president of the United States to have been found guilty of colluding with another foreign country or operating as a proxy of another country's leader, this is extremely dangerous for us as a country. So the fact that Mueller report came out, no evidence of collusion, that's a good thing for America. And
Yes, but it's bad for your party. It's bad for your party, which is the issue, right? Like, the Democratic Party didn't care whether or not Trump was guilty. They needed him to be guilty. The only way for this coup to have worked, and yes, I call it a coup. It was a soft coup. They were using Mueller. She's right. If Mueller would have came back, whether it was legit or not, wouldn't have mattered one iota. Those Democrats who's howling right now for Trump to be taken out of office on a structure of something that didn't exist would have been howling twofold. They didn't care whether or not he was innocent or guilty. They needed him to be guilty. The fact that they've gone through with this nonsense, even with him being, innocent of this particular thing, the absurdity of this shouldn't be lost on human beings, on people. Let's let her finish. But she's right. It would not be a good thing for the President of the United States to be a Russian plant. Just saying.
it is a great thing for us to see our opportunity now come together. Let's come together, set this aside, and actually focus on the issues that people in this country are worried about. And I tell you what, Glenn, several months I've been out visiting communities in different parts of the country, holding town hall meetings, sitting in living rooms and around kitchen tables. Only once, probably in the last 5 or 6 months, has anyone asked a question about the Mueller report or Russia or
Bill
anything
Barr
else.
or Putin or any of that.
No.
So let's talk about some of the things that your campaign is focused on.
People don't care. That's the point. People don't care. This stuff about Trump and Russia and Barr and all of this other stuff. Do you honestly believe that most people pay minute detail attention to the stuff? I mean, we do, but do people who just go about their way really pay this much attention to this stuff in minute detail? Meaning, when they get up in the morning, are they talking about Trump and Russia, or are they talking about their jobs? Are they talking about the kids going to some kind of, swamp meet? Not swamp meet. Jesus Christ, that's a horrible kid. Where that kid is shouldn't be doing that for his physical education, whatever. But you know what I mean. The kid is going on some kind of field trip. The kid is doing this or doing that. The person is concerned about whether or not they can make ends meet. Maybe they're taking some kind of adult to the hospital, to the doctor's office. You have people with all sorts of things that fill their lives. The thing that is not filling their life is Bill Barr, is Trump and Russia, and a conspiracy theory that didn't take place. I think Nancy Pelosi is right on this. Her political acumen, I don't necessarily distrust. I just don't necessarily like what she uses it for. In this case, if she's thinking that an impeachment is going to be bad for them, I suspect that she is right. I suspect part in part that she's right because of this. People don't care. This is not something that directly affects their lives. This is something that has taken place in Washington. This is political intrigue of sorts, where they're using the political device to attack the president. They don't care. 50% of the population thought this was a witch hunt. Those are extremely high numbers. And you're trying to take the president down and you don't have public support? We'll see. I think Tulsi is right here, though. I think ultimately, when she's talking to people on the campaign trail, this is not something they care about. And understand one thing also, and I'll leave it at this. This conversation, to some degree, sucks the air out of the room in main issues that her and Sanders want to talk about. Meaning, they want to talk about healthcare. They want to talk about education. They want to talk about expanding infrastructure. Those are the things that there's bread and butter issues. In fact, the more that they talk about those things, the more people like them because people agree with those things. In the context of talking about the Russiagate, in the debate or talk about this, they lose something in this because they don't necessarily care all that much about this. They're not that invested into it. These other Democrats, like Elizabeth Warren, are jockeying for a position that Tulsi and Sanders don't want to occupy. So this is not a debate in the conversation they necessarily want to have. Nor do I think they want to take the position of arguing against it, because that one is just a little bit weird in the context of Democratic primaries. But again, the goal is to get through the primaries. And if the people who Elizabeth Warren are catering to and trying to get an impeachment hearing is in the primaries, they may get more votes. So I understand why some of the Democrats contenders talk about this stuff incessantly. Just depends on what your goal in politics is, right? All right, I'll end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please consider sharing, liking. Oh, there's a super chat. Donald Smead, you're on fire today. Ah, thank you, Donald. I appreciate it. You're in flames. You're in flames. 50% always thought it was a witch hunt. Another 5% or so realized it was. Still 45% confused about it, abandoned and now. Yes, Thomas Paine. Yes. Yeah, I can agree with that. But here's the other part, right? There's a percentage of people who don't care. That's the catch. When you're talking about media, when you're talking about Democrats, these people had every incentive in the world to take the position that they took. They did. My mom, when I was having a conversation with her about this, she told me one day, she says, I don't care if he colluded with Russia or not. I just dislike him. That's honest. She was being honest with me. But what that means is even somebody as sweet as her would say, I don't care if he colluded with the Russians or not. I just hate his guts. They didn't care whether or not he was innocent or not. They just hated his guts. And I'll end it on this. All right, guys. If you enjoy it, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal Patreon. Thanks all.